Hello and welcome back to another episode of Combustion RC. In today's video, we're going to be going into the Traxxas 4-Tec and we're going to be taking it down to the differentials and getting this ready for indoor racing. As you can tell, it still has everything is stock minus the transponder, and I did change out the receiver. Oh, and the steering servo, which I did those off camera. They're actually pretty straightforward if you've ever changed out a servo, pretty easy to do. The only thing I did have to do is because I used a Savex servo, I used the 1256 TG. I did have to shave a little bit of the corner down with an X-Acto to clear the steering knuckle right there. You can see that steering knuckle is very, very close to that servo. So unfortunately, I did have to do that, which means I lost that nice little fancy orange metal plate on the front. We're gonna get into this. I've got a bit of a cheat sheet here from someone who races 4-Tec on CRC black carpet, because this is going to be my first time, and they said to put 500 CST shock oil in the front. So I've got some 500, which is 40 weight. They said to put 3K diff fluid in the front, so I got my 3K diff fluid. Said to put 2K in the rear, so I've got that. To put the black stripe spring on the front, that is part number 8364. They also say to put 450 CST shock fluid in the rear. From what I can tell, 450 CST shock fluid is right about 37 weight. I don't have anything in that ballpark. What I have is some 35 weight Racer's Edge, which is 425 CST. So I'm going to fill it 3/4 full with 425 and the final quarter with the 500 CST, which is the 40 weight. Together, that should make it roughly 450 CST. So that's what we're gonna do today. So let's go ahead and start taking this guy apart. For this, from what I can tell, 2mm. So whether you're using a hand driver or a little screw gun, 2mm is all you're gonna need, aside from a 7mm to take the wheels off. So you are gonna need that. I may take off too much to get these out because I don't know what I'm doing. Because as I said, this is all new to me. I've never worked on a 4-Tec, and the 4-Tec that I raced previously was someone's extra one that they set up. I just drove it. Made the podium with it, but I had no idea what was done to the car. So that's what we're doing. The only other thing that I did to it personally is I did put 2mm ball stud spacer here on the back, the plastic ones that it comes with. Just to lower that roll center, I raised these inner ones 2mm. So, because that was something that I noticed is the back end over rotates a lot. And so I just wanted to try to help that plant just a little bit. I know on off-road, if it's high grip, if you raise that inner ball stud a little bit, it helps plant that rear end. So I'm hoping that it does the same on road. If it doesn't, I'll find out the hard way on November 7th for our first test and tune day before racing starts. And then I'll know what to do and what to not do before we actually start the point series. So let's get into it, shall we? All right, and same as the tire gluing video, I've got you kind of upright with the straight down view, which is why you're seeing the stand that the phone is sitting on. One other thing that I do need to mention that you will need, since we are messing with diffs and shocks, is a roll of paper towel. Make sure you have a whole roll handy because we're going to be using probably a fair amount of it. All right, so let's do the rear first, because usually the rear is a little easier and is a little more telling as to what all is going to need to be done to get it out. Just by glancing at it here, it looks as though it is a top removal. So it looks like the best thing to do will probably be to remove the rear shock, since I'm going to have to redo those anyway, which means I'm going to need to remove the rear body mounts. And since I pulled this out of the box and I haven't raised these yet, I have to do a little extra work. All right, so another very important thing that you don't need, but I highly suggest, is a screw mag tray. So another interesting thing that we can do that I haven't purchased yet is a 4mm grub screw to put in here to actually adjust the droop so that that arm is not hanging down but it's flush. That is something that I will be doing. I just haven't purchased yet. Interestingly enough, it looks like so far most of the screws are the same length. They're either just button or socket head. It does look like I'll need to remove the motor cover to get to that, so let's go ahead and take that off as well. Just as I was hoping it wouldn't be, these are in the way. Traxxas has often been one that likes to put things in the way of needing to get other things off, especially when it comes to differentials, so it shouldn't surprise me. Hopefully I only have to do this once instead of multiple times. And they don't make that easy to get in and out either. So we are going to have to do this. Much as I didn't want to do that either. And there's a fair amount of black grease in there, so we're going to go ahead and actually lay out a piece of paper towel to put that on. I was hoping this would be made more like a race car to where you can remove the diff without having to remove a whole bunch of extra stuff to get to it, but unfortunately that is not the case. Pull our very tiny dog bones out here, but look, they are actually metal. So that's nice. So we're just going to put that there so that it doesn't get knocked over. As you can see, diff grease gets everywhere, so just be ready for that. Surprisingly, this is also 2mm screws. And unfortunately, just like the Grom, the bearing is overlapping the edge of the screws. If I would have looked at that first, I would have realized that's easy to get off. But like I said, we're learning together. And I always forget that Traxxas has the outdrives that have this guy in there. That you just remove this grub pin. And the outdrive comes off. Which means then that bearing slides off super easy. Just like so. So, yeah. Live and learn. So if you're trying to do this between rounds at a race day, the odds of you getting this done in time, and if you don't have a screw gun, you're not getting this done in time. That's just all there is to it. If you're using hand tools, this is ridiculous. And that is some gross looking grease. Very gross. And this is brand new. I literally drove it down the driveway for not even 4 minutes. And this grease is coming off this black. I will say it is nice to see a rubber seal in there though, and not a seal that is just paper or cork. That is kind of nice. But whatever this garbage is that's in here is not pretty. And there's only one set of spider gears in there. So you got one set of planetary gears, which look almost like sun gears. And then an outside planetary gear that looks nothing like a sun gear. So these look like ring and pinion gears that are just on the outside as well. So very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Let's go ahead and just try to get this cleaned up as much as possible so that that fresh fluid we put in there doesn't mix with this and give us some strange viscosity. On 8-scale cars, I build a gear diff and then I'll write in a Sharpie, I'll write 10K or 5K or 3K or 2K or 7K or 15K. I'll do whatever and I'll have a whole bunch of them so I can just pop them in the car, pull them out. I don't even have to deal with the diff grease except for once a year. That being said, this is a little bit of a sad deal. Just because I might have to do this more than once. So we'll go ahead and put our planetaries back on here. And these drop in just like so. Make sure they're spread out enough they go in the grooves they're supposed to go in. Because these actually do have grooves they settle into over here. They are a pretty nice steel though, I will say that. They're much nicer than some of the older Traxxas gears I've seen, especially the 4-pin, or the 4-pin planetaries that go in between the sun gears on like the older Slashes. So if the Slash is using something like this now, that'd be really nice. If you're hearing a strange pop, pop, pop noise, there is a fly that is stuck inside of my lights, so he's bouncing around there making a lot of noise, but not really worried about him at the moment. All right, so this is our rear. And our rear, do you remember what we said on the rear? Rear is 2K. This guy here. So we got our 2K. As you can see, there's nothing blocking it, so we're just going to open it up. And give it a little squishy squish. Just enough to kind of play in there. You don't want to get too much. You don't want to fill it up all the way or you get a whole bunch of ooze out. So just fill it up part way. And make sure those pins are on there because there is guide pins on here. Get those guide pins in place. Make sure that gear turns. Looks like our gasket stayed in place, so we can go ahead and put our screws back in now. Remember, just like tightening the lugs on a car, you want to make sure you're doing alternate sides. Go ahead and spin it around a couple times so everything gets seated in there good. These are actually plastic outdrive cups. That's interesting. I would assume with the BL2S being such a higher output, they would have went to metal outdrive cups. I just see these breaking. Hope they don't break, but I see them breaking. As you can tell, I got a fly that just landed right here in my tray. So we're gonna dispose of him. So I'm just gonna grab my 2mm hand wrench just to make sure everything is snugged up good. Because the last thing you want is for it to be, it's good to have it a little loose, but you don't want to have it too loose to where you're stripping gears out. That still had about a half turn before it was snug, so I had went the extra half turn. So we put our bearing on, put our out drive on here, and then our out drive pin. Uh-oh. Stuck to our magnet tray, so not a bad thing. That's what it's for. Look for the side it was threaded on before, so there's that side, it was where it's threaded. I'll put that back in here. Now these you don't have to worry about putting thread lock on because unlike some diffs, it's not metal into metal, it's metal into plastic, so you don't need to thread lock those. All right, now that diff is good. So we're just gonna get our black grease. Make sure you keep your hands clean as you go because that's what needs to be done. Otherwise you're gonna get just stuff everywhere. All right, so then we're gonna go ahead and screw that back down actually. And we'll bring our dog bones back up. Looks like we can actually lower the links down here at the bottom as well and still have adjustability for camber. So more roll center things we can change as we go. I haven't seen anybody run the links or the low end, but might be something to worth try because everybody's driving is a little bit different. So, you know, never hurts to try things that might be different from someone else if it matches your driving style. What I'm doing right now is just something to give me kind of a base point to move from. So now we're going to go ahead and just rebuild these tiny shocks here. My goodness, they're tiny. These will definitely use much less fluid than off-road shocks. Being Traxxas, there is one thing you do have to be careful of, and that is these bottom things like to get loose from the factory. And these shock caps have, if these are anything like normal Traxxas shocks, they will have a, what am I trying to say? They will have a rubber bladder inside of them. Which if you watched my Rustler video that was posted up on this channel, also was on my old channel from 3 years ago, you'll see what I like and don't like about these. All right, so the rear is what we're gonna put 450 CST in, and like I said, I don't have 450. So I'm going to put just a couple drops of 40 in there. Definitely prefer the associated bottles because they have this much smaller and elevated lip to squirt the fluid out of instead of this big one that has this weird thing on the side that just makes the fluid drip all over your fingers. That's what I get for being impatient and not ordering the factory team stuff, which I should have, or gotten on to RC1 and ordered some PT racing oil because even better, or JTP racing fluid. And just like usual, I get carried away with the stuff and I can't get the bladder back in. There, oh, almost. There we go. Oh, still too much. I hate Traxxas shocks. Sometimes if you can't get it to cooperate, you're just gonna have to do the thing that's more forcible, which is put it into the cap so that the cap can make it cooperate. And believe it or not, I think I screwed that all up anyway. Oh yeah, look at all that air in there. I'm not even gonna try to mix, we're just doing 425. Normally that would be plenty of room for that bladder, so let's do that, push our piston up. That feels much better. I gotta get my paper towel roll I dropped. The part of it I could reach, it actually rolled halfway across the room. So that's fun. All right, so that shock actually feels significantly better than the factory one does. I'm happy with that. Factory one just feels gross. We're gonna crack this other one open here. We're not soaked through, so that's good. And then we'll have to do the same thing again when we get to the front ones. So we'll go ahead and set this stuff to the side. Set our 35 weight aside, set our 2K aside, and set this wrench aside that wants to just take off running. The fronts, like I said, we are going to be doing different springs. We're going to get our springs open and ready to rock. So our rear is ready to go back together now. And what I read was to make sure that we still use the inner shocks. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah, they're pretty much setting where I wanted to set without even having to put the grubs on. All right, so then we'll just put our motor mounts back on, or motor spur cover. All right, and that's it. Now I just need to do our rear body mounting. All right, now I'm gonna be running that 69 Camaro body, so we're gonna go ahead and, we're gonna go ahead and just raise this straight up. I don't think I'll need to move it either forward or backward any, but do have those options if needed. All right, and that's our rear end now done. Now on to the front end. And the front end looks like it's pretty well gonna be very similar. So just gotta take the front bumper off first. That come off rather easy. And same thing we did on the back, we're gonna do on the front. All right, so this part's gonna be not so much fun because it looks like I have to take all these screws off to get this decking off before I can do the ones that are on here, like we had on the back. Now we can do just like we did back there, but opposite. Looks like our steering links. Oh my gosh, those are just bushings in there, not even bearings in the, oh my. All right, now that we know what we're doing, we can see that this is already going much faster than the rear, even though the front has more screws and more things to take off. Oh, this one, the gasket decided to come off. We'll have to take care of that. I have no idea what weight this factory fluid is, but it is a very odd weight. In the car, it feels incredibly thin. Outside of the car, it feels incredibly thick. I do like that there is an O-ring in there, though, for a seal there. That's nice. And this diff fluid, though. My goodness. I don't know. I mean, that is the strangest thing ever. It's like glue, yet it diffs out. And this feels thicker having this in here. Don't know. Just don't know. The words of Derek Bierry, help me understand. I started out with Associated, and they always have a soft spot in my heart. I think a lot of guys can say that are sponsored drivers that drive for different companies. Especially some of the older guys that are older than me that maybe started out with like the RC10. They had their old gold pan RC10s. Yeah, I bet you got a real soft spot for Associated at that point. You just saw me do that and didn't say anything? Why didn't you guys tell me that I just put that back together without putting diff fluid in it? My goodness, it's like a one-way conversation. Oh wait, it's because it is. And yes, I know there's no black grease on there. I'll do that in a second. Oh no. Oh, I got lucky. It landed right side up on the carpet. I got so lucky. I will say these two, you want to make sure they're not too tight, especially since we now know that those are just plastic bushings in there. Because if they're too tight, that'll bind up and it won't move good. Now, before we put our bumper back on, it's time to do our shocks. Now, that person did say to put 3mm spacers in the front shocks, none in the rear. So that's what we're doing here. They also said to put black stripe springs on the front and remove the stocks. And these we're going to do just like the rears, except for putting 500 CST. If you're wondering how I'm building or bleeding these shocks, go ahead and check out the Pro 2 SC10 shock rebuild video. I'm rebuilding these exactly the same way. So if you're wondering what all that is, it'll be just like that. These are simply much shorter. And then these will get droop screws to bring them up to where they're right about there. So they'll be even across. No, zero droop. I can tell you right now, the weight transfer already feels much better on this thing than it did. Because it was really bad. All right. And she is set and ready. Now it's just time waiting for the body to come in, and the 4-Tec will be ready to rock. That's it for today's video. So until next time, keep the rubber side down, the shiny side up, and remember to stay in the group.